We welcome now the Speaker of the House of Representatives for the great state of Mississippi, Speaker Jason White. Mr. Speaker, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Gerard. Good to be here. Thank y'all for having us.
I just want to say we had a good time playing golf a couple of weeks ago. Great event. The House Leadership Fund hosted and raised a little money and played a little golf and ate some dinner. That was fun, wasn't it?
It was fun. I have to make one clarifying statement here.
Okay.
I don't play golf, as you know.
That's right.
So I hosted the golf tournament, right? But no, I appreciated everybody's support and showing up. And it was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
It was good.
And the Beau Rivage was hopping, wasn't it?
It was hopping. Look, the coast is hopping in general, booming. But specifically there, we got it going on for sure.
Yeah, I think back. Of course, my wife from Biloxi. After Katrina, we were able to get in because her folks' place was completely flattened down on the point there, about a block off the beach. Would you ever thought it would look like it does today? Man, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
It demonstrates I think the resilience and the drive and the commitment of the people of Mississippi, and in particular on the coast. The coast's got it going on.
They do.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. Well, we're between sessions. You're in your casual attire today. Good to see you in that, for sure. And it was a lengthy session because it was the first of the term, of course. I heard so many members, Mr. Speaker, say, I don't remember one like this ever. Now, you've been there a while as well, and some of these folks have been there a while. But I think a lot of that, sir, could be attributed to you. You had a very aggressive agenda. You hopped on it early, and you pushed a lot of issues. You know, everything that you advocated for didn't become law, but you got the conversation going as much as I can remember.
We did, and I told somebody, they said, "Oh well, y'all's playbook," I said, "Look, there is no playbook for running the House of Representatives," and all I had known, of course, is Speaker Gunn's leadership because my 12 years prior, I obviously served under him as Speaker.
Sure.
And I thought he did a great job of running the House. And was fair to all members, regardless of what some folks might say. And so we wanted to do that, but instead of a broad approach, as far as coming out of the Speaker's office in the Republican caucus, we had 3 or 4 things that we really wanted to, move the needle on, start the conversation, see where we could get legislatively. And certainly we didn't get all of those things, but I made a commitment to the body to focus on big things, the things that you wake up in the morning and as a smart guy, successful businessman, concerned Mississippian, the things that you think about, when you ride down the road by yourself or when you get up in the morning and go on your run, things that are on your mind that worry you about our state or about our economy or about our people. Those are the things we want to work on and not focus so much on hot button. Nothing wrong with political victories on red meat issues, but and we had some of those. But we wanted to focus on like really, really big things and see if we could make some headway. And probably even against some people's advice on things like, they didn't want us to turn over the PERS rock and look at that, the Public Employees Retirement System. And nobody was dying to do that.
Yeah. But
we thought it was something. We thought we were, being derelict in our duty if we didn't.
Sure.
So we did. We were just naive or new enough to do that.
Yeah.
So by and large, I think it was a successful session in that we were able to get stuff out on the table and start some conversations, as you say.
Yeah.
And we had some big wins, too.
What would you consider the notable accomplishments?
For us, it was our number one priority, and we were able to get there. And that was the funding formula by which we fund our K-12 public schools in Mississippi. And everybody's probably tired of talking about that. And we're trying to do a good job of turning the page and thinking about what we want to work on for 25. But it is worth noting that we were able to move away from that archaic formula that not only did anybody understand, in spite of what Senator Bryan says, we didn't fund. We've already funded it, the new formula half as many times as the 25-year-old formula got fully funded. We fully funded this new formula this year, and MAEP in its 25-year history was only funded twice.
Wow.
That's a sign that something about it wasn't just right. So anyway, we thought that was big. It was a step toward funding students over systems, and you're not just chasing this bureaucratic or administrative high of, okay, here's the number, so next year it's got to be more. Does it? Are there as many students? Are we funding it the same way? How many teachers do you like, we're actually going to fund it based on students and their needs. And so we're excited about that. And now we will turn our attention more to the accountability model as well as different forms of school choice for our parents. And folks say, oh, well, why do the Republicans keep harping on that? Here's why. Because voters are demanding it. It's not, somebody's not sitting around the water cooler at the Capitol saying, what can we do next? They're actually hearing from parents and taxpayers and voters. And that's where these things come from. In spite of what anybody may think, there's no personal agendas in that area. We still want, and the majority of our state wants, good public schools in their community. That's what they want. That's the model. It educates the vast majority of students in our state. And we've had gains the last few years under Republican leadership, I might add, and historic funding levels and teacher pay raises and all the things. So for the bad rap that we sometimes get as Republicans, I think we've done an excellent job, not only supporting but reforming public education. I don't want to do anything to make us take a step back. I want to build on those successes. And I think the natural next place to do that is, let's see, okay, if we're going to spend plenty of money, let's be sure we're spending it wisely and that we're rewarding the successful ones, and we're taking a longer look at the ones that are not so successful and how we can do better in those places.
You brought me the latest fiscal year 2025 budget bulletin published by the Legislative Budget Office. And the thing I've always enjoyed about the data produced, the reports produced by the LBO, are, of course, I'm holding them up now, the pie charts, which side by side show the major categories of revenue and the major categories of spending and the percent each takes of its respective category. We're talking about public education. That's, according to the latest 2025 budget, 54% of our spending. And that's the case in virtually every state. Right. Education is
we
the
actually
biggest
spend
line
a little
item.
more. We actually spend a little more in Mississippi than other states, but not a lot more as far as a percentage of our budget. Some states rely a little more on local taxes, but our state spends a little more proportionately than most other states.
Okay, so it's education consumes the majority.
That's correct.
of our general fund
folks,
spending.
More than 50 cents of every dollar you send to the state of Mississippi.
That's where it's going.
That's where it's going.
Yeah. So I think that was a monumental accomplishment, honestly, to essentially restructure the funding formula. We came up short. You talked about school choice a little bit. We thought I thought we had a very good bill. I know you advocated for that, and Representatives Rob Robertson, Kent McCarty,
right,
ran with that. Just couldn't get that through the House.
We couldn't. And here was the thing: we were being accused with this new funding formula of that was the Trojan horse to universal school choice. And so we were kind of losing some support for our funding formula based on that notion. So we kind of had to direct all our political capital and attention to getting that formula passed. And I've had told anybody who would listen, I've stated publicly, on with you, on with Paul, everywhere I speak, I am for a robust school choice system. Now, there are some realities around it in that not so many of my friends are for it, or they say they're for it, but the devil's always in the details. If they're in an excellent public school district, all of a sudden their local school board starts calling them saying, why are you saying this? You're going to mess up our good school district. So each person kind of has a little different take on it. So there's not a universal, I can't say there's been a meeting of the minds on what that looks like, but here's what reasonable people are starting to agree on. Things like, you should be able to transfer from one public school to any other public school, and the state portion of the two of that per student cost should be able to follow that child. That should be a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. If the parents are willing to make up the difference and that other school will accept you, your home school district shouldn't be able to hold you against your will. That's number one. That should be a no-brainer. We call that a portability piece, and we're going to push hard for that next session. In addition to that, if you are in a D or F school district that is chronically failing, and your parents or the taxpayers in almost every case, mind you, are willing to take on transporting you to some other school district or some other, we ought to allow that. And at least the state share of the per student cost should be able to follow that child. To me, those are kind of no-brainers, and most reasonable people, putting agendas aside, can kind of agree on that. And we think that's a good starting place.
Still would be a situation where the base school would not be able to prevent transfer,
Correct.
but the receiving school would have to agree to it,
That's
correct? That's usually the model.
That's correct.
Yeah. If you can hang around, we'll dig in some more.
Yes, sir.
We got Speaker of the House, Jason White, in the Element Well studio, and we're coming right back. Studio, we're visiting with Speaker of the House, Jason White. So, no doubt, the education formula was a big deal and got that through the Senate. The governor signed off on it. I think that was a big win for the state of Mississippi. Arguably the biggest accomplishment of the session, and certainly don't want to downplay it. That's a major deal.
It was a major deal.
Yeah.
We had passed it in the House in 2018 under Speaker Gunn's leadership, and Richard Bennett was our education chairman. We had passed it in the House and sent it down to the Senate, and of course that's when Governor Reeves was lieutenant governor, and it lost by, if I remember right, by 2 votes in the Senate on deadline day. And so we were so close 6 years ago and weren't able to get it across the finish line. So it had kind of been a goal of ours. We thought that was the next natural step, and we spent a lot of political capital getting it there.
Yeah.
But it was worthy, and it was worth it. And we think it was a good first step. We've got a new state superintendent of education. He'll come in with this new formula. We're looking at we're going to spend a lot of time on the accountability model. MDE is already working on it themselves, and we want to partner with them on that and kind of move that along and be sure we're measuring our schools in a way that taxpayers and parents and our students deserve. And so we're going to spend a lot of time on that in addition to our more robust school choice.
The state auditor and others, as you know, have exposed the distinction between education funding that goes to the classroom and education funding that goes to back office admin cost, and Mississippi seems to be a little weighted towards the admin cost category. What do you think about that and what we should do there?
There is some truth to that. And that's why you've seen in the last funding increases and as well as teacher pay increases, and even the $100 million that we injected in the 23 session at the end of session.
Yeah.
You saw caveats on all that legislation.
Yeah.
It was like, this cannot go to administrative cost. It has to find its way into the classroom or be brick and mortar. It cannot be administrative. And that's some pushback from that. We're going to continue to look at that, as well as somebody asked me the other day, they're like, well, are y'all not going to continue to look at ways to consolidate? And, that was a big push my first, 2013, 14, 15 sessions. And those are admirable goals. I remind people the city of Houston, Texas school system has more students than our entire state of Mississippi. They have one superintendent that runs all of those schools. And I know they're in a little closer
Big
proximity.
staff, though,
Big
underneath
staff,
him, though.
Huge.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, huge. But my point is we could do some things different and look for ways to achieve some better economies of scale. But, our voters and taxpayers, for the most part, everybody wants to do something about the system, but they love their superintendent. You know what I'm saying? And so, for that makes politics get real tricky when you start talking about those kind of things. We just have to do a better job of drilling down on where that money is spent and in that accountability model. And I think you're going to see some emphasis put on that going forward.
Well, could not the state place some? You were talking about some of this additional funding that usually is inserted in the last-minute appropriations bills and so forth, and then placing restrictions on that. Is it possible? Of course it is. Would it not?
Sure.
Through law, for the state to say, okay, this is how much we're sending every district, the per pupil base cost, and with the adjustments based on the new funding formula. Perhaps you could impose some restrictions on how that money is directed.
Yes, and the new funding formula does a better job of that, whereas MAP, it didn't. You were funding a system. You weren't funding students specific to that district.
Yeah.
So this moves away from what they call units. We were funding units under the MAP, and it's incredibly complicated for this
Yeah. No.
country lawyer, it was tough for me to understand the way that MAP was done. But you were always chasing that system and that teacher unit and the school system and district in general, and not the students and the teachers, which are what we say we want to spend most of our time on and our money, for that matter.
I'm going to make a suggestion, just something that has occurred to me, and I know you're aware of this. We have F districts that have overweight to the admin side versus A districts. I wonder if we just shouldn't take the best performing districts in our state and just contrast them side by side on all various sorts of inputs and measurements and just the profile of the district. Hey, look, this one over here is an A. Maybe we ought to try to do it the way that one does it, just as an exercise, perhaps.
Well, in the way that the state takes over a failing school district, when a school district is chronically failing, the state does come in and receivership, and take it over.
Yeah.
What we find is when the state sends their leadership in there, all of a sudden that school system starts kind of bubbling up and righting the ship, and things are going great. And then the minute it gets turned back over to some of these locals, we fall off in the ditch again. So we've got to look at the way that happens as well for our chronically failing or underperforming school districts.
Just seems like we ought to take the formula and emulate it. What's working in the best performing districts, and we have several. That's the good news. We have several that are outstanding.
We do.
Let's figure out what they're doing and replicate that.
One other thing we want to do, and the governor's indicated some support for this, and so we're going to work hard on this piece through the fall and into next session. We would like to create a few what we're going to call a magnet schools or community schools, where maybe on the campus at Delta State and maybe on the campus at Mississippi Valley, maybe even at MUW, maybe at Alcorn, maybe even a few of our community colleges, where they can attract faculty. So that's not so much of an issue, and just give people in a geographic region. If you're in a failing school district, you can just, if you're willing to transport and get your kid there, we're going to create a high school in these places, and that's going to be your choice.
Okay.
And all the money follow that kid there. And we'll see if it's under leadership, and that leadership would be more of a state leadership type setting. Does it make a difference? And certainly at some of those universities I mentioned with their declining enrollments, they've got the facilities that are there. They may have to it'll cost some money, but at least we'll have a pilot program to show, or not. The data will bear it out. Do these kids perform different in these different settings, or is it truly related to other socioeconomic factors that we struggle so hard with?
Yeah.
Our poverty and special ed and other things that seem to weight us down.
Our goal, I've always believed, should be to constantly work on the ways, the approaches to increase our per capita income, our household income. We rank lowest in the nation on that. We have to be honest about that. And it's great to improve the quality of education, but the ultimate goal, the result should be people are better skilled to have higher paying jobs, and our economy grows, and so does the quality of life.
It should. And here's another piece that's part of our package, so to speak. We do an excellent job of graduating high school kids who are college prep ready. Like 93% of our graduates are college prep. They can hit a 4-year university and qualify to get in. The problem is only about a third of them actually go, and only half of that third graduates with a 4-year degree. We need to acknowledge that most of our students are looking or desire something different, and let's start giving that to them in the 10th or 11th grade. Partner with our local community college. There's one in every district, and where when they walk across the stage at high school, they've not only got their high school diploma, they've got a degree that leads to a highly skilled, good-paying job that's actually available in our state. And we're not reinventing the wheel there. Other states are doing a good job of that, and we could just copy it and let's do it.
Yeah.
But again, you might be stereotyping. They say if you don't allow that child, I'm saying let the parents make that decision. They can come to the school and check the box that says, little Johnny wants the career tech path, and if that school district doesn't provide it, then he gets to go to another one that does.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
Makes total sense. You totally agree. Let's talk about health care, which is another big issue in the state. And by the way, if you look at our budget, we just discussed that 54% in the 2025 budget, general fund budget, goes to education. The next biggest spending line item is what's called, I believe, social welfare by the Legislative Budget Office. That's mostly Medicaid. That's
correct.
About 15%.
Yep, a little over 15% of our budget. It is and then the next one after that is corrections at about half of that, about almost $500 million.
And then it's everything else. It's really education, Medicaid, corrections, and then everything else. Is
70% is between education, Medicaid, and corrections.
Yeah.
We had some wins there. We moved the needle in the conversation on Medicaid and what we should do about our working poor in Mississippi, but we were able positively to pass a state-based exchange, healthcare exchange, that we think could possibly really move the needle going forward. I hear the music. We're fixing to go.
If you can come back, we can talk about it. We got Speaker of the House Jason White in the Element Wealth studio. We're fortunate to have Speaker of the House Jason White with us today, just recapping the 2024 legislative session. So in the last segment, we ended by discussing the thorny topic of health care in the state of Mississippi. And it's because there's just so many dimensions to it. We not only have an economic and a financial challenge. Many of our hospitals are struggling to even produce a positive cash flow. We've got a large uninsured population, but we're also the very unhealthy state. So we have a health problem and a health care, if you will, problem.
We do. And some of those problems aren't unique to Mississippi, but certainly when you have a large uninsured population, on top of a very unhealthy state, and we can argue about the reasons and debate the reasons why we're so unhealthy, but simple fact is we are. And for the foreseeable future, that's where we're going to be. And so much of the debate this past session that centered around, quote, Medicaid expansion, if you will, if we're even able to say that word out loud, was about trying to acknowledge kind of that gap. And we can debate the number of people that are truly in that gap that are actually working without health insurance. And I'm not here to say that if you have a job, you deserve health insurance. But what I am here to say is the uninsured are a constant drag on our healthcare economy in a way that affects every person in this state. If you have private insurance, the uninsured folks that are circulating in that same market, they affect your rates, whether anybody's willing to admit that or not. And so we have such a large population in that area. If there's a way to fix it or offer some sense of help there, I just think we're not being truthful to acknowledge, the Affordable Care Act was passed supposedly to fill that gap. Now, I would suggest to you that the National Democrats did that to move one step closer to a single-payer system. But whatever their motivations, it's here and it's with us. And now that 20 Republican states and 20 Democratic states have enacted it, that's 80% of the country, we're probably not going back for the foreseeable future. So we've either, we've proven for 12 years we'll be stubborn and won't even look at it. We wanted to have the conversation, have the debate, and figure out, is there a way for us to take advantage of it in a way that covers our low-income workers in Mississippi and not cost the taxpayer a pile of money? And if there was, we wanted to avail ourselves to it, and we weren't going to be caught simply by the ideologues who say, that's welfare. That's welfare. You're giving that away, and I have to pay for it, and that's welfare. I get it. I'm just telling Joe taxpayer, you're paying for it now. In your federal and state taxes that you pay. You're paying for it in uncompensated care. You're paying for it in the high health insurance rates that you pay for yourself and your employees or however you do it, however you acquire it. You're paying for it now because it costs the same to run that hospital regardless.
Yeah, the thing to keep in mind that I've talked about even on the show and in the public square somewhat is that it's different in that these aren't checks. This isn't money. This isn't cash. These aren't tax rebates going to individuals. This is money that never sees their bank account. This
That's
actually
correct.
Goes to the provider.
That's correct.
So the thing that's always troubled me is that we have a federal law, the EMTALA law, the Emergency Medical Treatment Labor Act, passed in 1986 under Ronald Reagan, which compels hospitals that operate emergency rooms to stabilize the patient if they present, whether they can pay or not. And the federal government says, okay, we're making you do that to participate in Medicare and Medicaid, which virtually every hospital that has an ER does.
That's correct.
And we give you some compensation on the back end in the form of these disproportionate share payments to offset that, but it's a far cry from covering the actual cost. And so then they come along and say, okay, but now we have this expansion of these programs under the Affordable Care Act to offset that. So on the one hand, I feel like we're telling our hospitals, you go take care of all these people, but you can't get paid for them.
Right.
And so whether you call it polka dot or Medicaid expansion, that's a financial problem.
And that federal money that is available to cover those working individuals comes out of the same pot of money that the EMTALA money comes from, the dish payments, all of that other stuff. That's all federal. Mississippians are federal taxpayers. We pay our fair share to the federal government. And it's not like the federal government's putting that money over in a lockbox. They're just spending it on other things. Our argument was it's time to cover these individuals. And by the way, that is not a Cadillac insurance. It is very basic insurance that some doctors don't even take.
Most specialists don't.
Most specialists don't. You're correct. You've got to really search, and primary care providers know if they're having to refer a Medicaid patient on, they actually know where to look and where not to look to try to cover those folks. So that's a system in and of itself. So you're right. It's not a benefit paid primarily to these individuals. And I didn't get here, Gerard, from this bleeding heart thing of saying every person deserves health care. I got here because our healthcare economy in this state is broken. We're one of the most unhealthy states. I just think we're fooling ourselves to think that something else is coming down the line that's going to fix this. And I wanted to be, our Republicans are not. We've always been the party of solutions and trying to find a way. And that doesn't always mean that government is the answer. And I'm certainly not telling you if we were going to design a healthcare system, this is the way we design it. But it's here and it's with us, and we've got to exist in this world some kind of way. And we're asking our hospitals to see everybody that shows up at the back door. But you're not going to get paid for this certain set of patients, but you got to see them. I don't know. With that system being there and being available to cover these people in this gap, I think it makes sense for us to look at it. And that's why I thought the House plan was reasonable. It was a 4-year pilot program. It repealed in 4 years. I know everybody says, oh, you can't repeal a government program. Well, this one actually repealed. It would have taken another 3/5 vote in 4 years to keep it going. That would be under a new legislature, a new governor, a new lieutenant governor, new eyes looking at all of that. And that's the direction we were willing to go. And we knew for the first 4 years it didn't cost the state anything with the enhanced reimbursement, because the feds also bait you with an enhanced Medicaid reimbursement on your entire Medicaid population, which for us amounted to about $680 million these first 2 years. And we don't know what's going to happen with the subsidized federal exchange. Those premiums that are there and available now that they pay up to 100% of, those go away in 2 years. Now, to what extent, we don't know.
The 100% does. It would revert back to about 2% of household income is what it comes in as.
But those policies, if you talk to providers, people don't use those policies. They may have them because they're free to them. But if the deductible is $5,000 or $10,000, or if there's a copay, even if the copay is only $50, they don't pay it. And they certainly don't pay a $5,000 deductible. And so the hospital doesn't get to avail themselves to the insurance till the individual has paid that high deductible. So these folks that are touting the products that are currently available on the federal exchange at no cost to these individuals, they need to actually dig in and look at the data about folks that actually avail themselves to the coverage and what providers tell you about them. Now, that's the cold hard truth about them. And I hope our insurance commissioner, as we establish our state exchange, we're going to do a better job of hopefully some better products and better things that Mississippians can actually use. And I'm glad that Commissioner Cheney's going to be over that going forward, and it won't purely be a federal exchange, but a healthcare exchange. That was a win that didn't get much coverage in the session because Medicaid or K-12 funding dominated the headlines. That's what everybody want to talk about. But the state exchange kind of making it through, we thought was good.
Yeah, so we're just for the benefit of the audience, we're just transitioning the federal government operating the current exchange to the state. That's always been available, but it really hasn't been practical or feasible to do that. The thing is advanced to the point now where it is, and so the state can save some money because we pay the federal government.
That's correct.
To operate the exchange.
If nothing else, we save that money. Correct.
Yeah, it's really. It's an IT endeavor more than it is anything else, honestly.
Right.
But that technology has advanced substantially since it went into effect 10 years ago.
But we're looking at, we get our state exchange, we may incentivize through tax credits, we may pass legislation to incentivize employers to cover these low-income workers through tax credits for the employer. So that's, we're
I shared with you some ideas I had about how to maybe create a hybrid model, and it really was a result of creating this state exchange. I think we're going to have more options, and maybe that's something we can take a look at.
On that.
Yeah, I think there's a possible option, and it would kind of assuage some of the concerns people have about so-called expansion of Medicaid, which is viewed as pure welfare. They don't think about those subsidies in the exchanges. That's really welfare.
It's really welfare.
It's actually really more expensive welfare.
It's more expensive. It's not delivered as well, but it is coming out of the same federal bank account. So anyway.
Always good to see you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate you coming in and sharing the update. And I know we'll be talking some more. Thank you, sir.
Good discussion. Thank you for having us.
You bet. We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth Studio.